Excellent. So as we wrap up Chapter 15, I do want to say, as we roll into the specification standard details, you're going to see more and more emphasis on the specifications as we grow as a group. One thing particularly, having spent a fair amount of time in capital projects and prior to that as design and construction, realizing that our specifications need updating. So we have some minor updates this year, but really focused on getting these lessons learned from the field through claims or whatnot captured in our specifications. So with that, turn it over to Jamie to talk about the revisions this year and hopefully more to come. So Jamie.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Okay, so I'm going to discuss the changes that we did for the construction specifications during this review cycle. So even though there weren't any Division 1 specs for review this time, there were some minor edits done to those specs. So during last year's review cycle, we decided to remove the revision dates from the footer of the standard specifications. So you see in the top, there's an example of how it used to look for divisions 2 through 16. There was a spec number along with the page, and the date of revision was below that. So last year we removed that date from the footer, and instead in the header we added the year of release of the specification. So last year we didn't get around to doing that for Division 1 specs, but this year we were able to get that done. So that same change was done for this release. As mentioned earlier, when I was going over the general changes that took place during this review cycle, I mentioned that there was an active supplement posted on the website for specification 1145. So that supplement has been incorporated into this year's release. So the supplement added a new paragraph to Article 1.05, notification to adjacent occupants. So on the top right is just a screenshot of the old supplement, and you can see on that supplement that it added a new paragraph D to 1.05. And on the bottom right is just a screenshot of how it looks now in the official specification for 1145. So this supplement, it just added some additional information. So in regards to small water lines, it requires that a 48-hour customer notification should be given by the contractor, and that a notice of customer communication form is completed. Just a little summary of that paragraph. Similar to what was stated earlier for the IDM red lines, specification red lines have been posted on the City of Houston website. On that PDF, you'll see detail as far as what exactly was changed in the documents. Red lines are available for two specifications that receive major revisions, which are 2751 concrete paving and 2752 concrete paving joints. So just to get access to all of these documents, again, I think it was mentioned earlier, but if you just go to the Design and Construction Standards website, select the Standards Review Committee tab, you will see past review cycle. You will see that there are links on the bottom for the IDM red lines and the specification and the detailed red lines. So this year also, we noticed going through some of the specifications that some of them some of the references within the specifications needed to be updated. There were some instances where, for example, an ASTM specification was listed but also had a year on there. And also over the years since the specification was released, the title was revised slightly. So here on your screen, I'm just showing an example of the type of red lines that we made to those references sections within the specifications. So there were also times too where we noticed maybe an ASTM was referenced within the text of the specification, but it wasn't listed in the references article of that specification. So as you see there, that last red line, that's just showing an example of a change that was made, just adding that ASTM reference to the specification. But it's not adding a completely new requirement to the specification. It was already mentioned within the spec. We just made sure it was listed on the front page in the references. So as you're going through the specifications, you'll notice some change bars on specs other than 2751 and other than 2752, and they're just for changes such as these. So again, out of all the specifications up for review, we only received comments on 2, which were 2751 concrete paving and 2752 concrete paving joints. So just a summary of the changes that took place. For 2751, the compressive strength requirement was revised, new form setting requirements were added, and new non-conforming pavement requirements were added. For concrete paving joints, spec 2752, filler board type was revised, and a new article on transverse weakened plane joints was added. So in the next few slides, I will discuss those changes. So I'm going to start with 2751 concrete paving. So for paragraph 2.03b, the compressive strength, it was revised from 3,000 psi to 4,000. This was done in order to align this requirement with the current minimum concrete paving compressive strength requirement listed in Chapter 10. So this isn't really a new requirement. This was already stated in the IDM. We just made sure that the specification was aligned with the chapters. The next change that was made to this spec, it was done in order to address ponding issues that have been occurring on brand new concrete panels with new curb. So paragraph 3.04.b.3 requires that prior to form setting, subgrade shall be graded so that there is positive drainage, free of sitting water or ponding in the gutter or on the pavement area of new panels. So this requirement may not be able to be met when installing a new pavement panel next to an existing pavement panel, but it shall be met between 2 new panels and within the area of new panels. So in relation to this new requirement that I just mentioned, paragraph 3.14.c, under non-conforming pavement requirements, it requires that new pavement panels that do not have positive drainage shall be removed and replaced. So this requirement does not apply at the construction joint between an existing panel and a new panel that has been installed to match the existing panel. It only applies between 2 new panels and within the area of the new panels. So the next specification that was revised is 2752 concrete paving joints. A revision was made to the filler board grade requirement. This specification, it previously specified clear all-heart cypress and redwood. Clear all-heart is the best grade of wood, and it's also extremely expensive. So requiring this grade, it was deemed unnecessary. Therefore, this was revised to require construction hard cypress and redwood. Also within the spec, there was a new article that was added titled Transverse Weakened Plane Joints. It's Article 3.07. So this was added because the City, Street, and Bridge Maintenance Group, they have a desire to reduce shrinkage and contraction cracks, which may be contributing factors to concrete slab deterioration, which could potentially require maintenance sooner. So in order to increase the longevity of the concrete in order to increase the longevity of the concrete, street and bridge maintenance has chosen to require regularly spaced transverse saw cuts to control cracking. So just to point out a few points within this article, the transfer contraction joint saw cut shall be every 20 feet in the pavement, but no greater than 20 feet between saw cuts. The width of the saw cut shall be a minimum of 1/4 inch wide, and the depth shall be 1/4 of the pavement thickness. Saw cut as soon as concrete has hardened enough to allow saw cutting. And make each saw cut with 1 pass. This is just a summary of this paragraph. But I mean, that pretty much covers the changes that have been made to the specifications. Again, just to recap, we only received comments on those 2 specifications. So those were the major changes, and those red lines are posted online. If you guys have any questions on the changes that were made to the specs, please enter them in the chat at this time.
All right, thanks, Jamie. I do want to add a couple comments, but as far as questions, I think we'll probably in a second here roll into standard details because we're a few seconds behind. And then if you have any of the spec questions, we'll certainly address them as time allows after the standard details. Thank you, Jamie, for this. I do want to point out, as we get our hands around the specs, because it's a big document. What you noticed last year is it's very weird to have a footer with different years on it that we had in Division 2 through 16. And the year at the bottom was supposed to mark the year it was last revised. And so we had a document at one time that every spec had a different year on the footer, which was very bizarre, at least for me, from my experience. So with this year, now Divisions 1 through, as Jamie touched on, 1 through 16, all have the year release date on it. That's the year you should be using if that's when it goes to bid per the 700 document. So you'll see as this group grows into specifications, we're handling this from an overview, tying in, looking at all the ASTMs throughout the specification, making sure those are up to date, addressing questions are received. But the full intent is to kind of dive in and get a lot of these things more up to date as we get into this. We are members of ASTM and CSI and making sure these are contractually written correct. But we do want to address these. The 20-foot saw cut line comes as no surprise that anybody's done any work for concrete pavement. We should already be doing that. And even in capital projects for years, I couldn't understand why that wasn't in there. So we had the opportunity to make that recommendation coming through the review cycle, through capital projects addressed, understand it needs to be met, and getting it in there, but we want to see more changes like that. So we really definitely want to avoid having to turn over an asset from capital projects to operations that's already cracked, that might already have these issues. A couple other issues that are in the hopper to discuss is high early concrete and the effects of using high early concrete and the cracks that occur for that, and the serviceability we're giving up with those issues and speccing that out correctly. But again, back to sort of resourcing this group and giving the time for this group to dive into those questions and address them. So just kind of want to touch on that before turning it over to Louise. That did eat up a couple minutes, but we should be able to get that back towards the back end of the overall presentation. So with that, Louise Garza is going to come back and talk to us about the changes made to the standard drawings. Louise?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think those points that you hit on are important to talk about, so I don't think that's okay if we went a little over there. Thank you. And as part of our work on the modifications to Chapter 10 of the IDM, the City of Houston updated and modified the street pavements and sidewalk details. Here's a summary of the changes made to these standard details. We redrew and combined the details onto 24-inch by 34-inch sheets. Details that we did not have an electronic copy of were redrawn. We revised the HMAC pavement detail, phased out the public use alley detail, incorporated the crack control joint specification requirement to the concrete pavement detail, and added notes to all sidewalk ramp details to clearly communicate the City of Houston requirements. The following slides will explain these items in more detail. I would like to encourage everyone to download the PDFs from the website, as some drawing details will be too small to see in this presentation. Don't worry, I will have some close-up shots on specific items in this presentation. The hard-to-read details will only be for general discussion. Drawing content changes have been tracked with revision clouds on a drawing set. They can be found on the Houston Permitting Center website. If you follow, a set of clouded revised drawings is available on our website under the Standard Review Committee sidebar and can be downloaded by clicking the Past Review Cycle link. Shown on the right is an example of the old detail layout, which shows one detail per 8.5-inch by 11 sheet. There's some drawings still available on the website in this format that were not part of this review cycle. Those drawings will be revised in future review cycles. The new detail layout has several details drawn on a single 22-inch sheet by 34-inch sheet. We have also updated the title block to include an area for the City of Houston stamp. Don't worry if you can't read the drawings on the next few slides. They're just provided as examples. As shown, these 4 8.5 by 11 details have now been combined into one drawing on one 22-inch by 34-inch sheet. It should also be noted that the city has retained the detail numbers and naming convention to ensure continuity with our 2019 details. There are other City of Houston details that are on the old 8.5 by 11 layout that will continue to be used, as required by IDM Chapter 3. Up to 4 details per plan sheet are allowed. The title blocks and City of Houston signatures are to be clearly shown on each 8.5 by 11 detail. This is an example of a plan set sheet with various 8.5 by 11 details arranged on a single plan set sheet. Now, the individual title block of the details have been removed and the detail resides on a fixed 22-inch by 34-inch sheet. The city requires that the new sheet in its entirety be added directly into the plan set. Details that have not been used will remain on the 22-inch by 34-inch sheet detail and will not contain any modifications. The city will no longer accept city and paving details other than in the new format. In this example, there are 2 of the 4 required details on this new layout sheet. The 2 details not used on this project will remain on this 22 by 34-inch sheet, unmodified and included in the plan set. In summary, regarding new layouts. Previously, we had 26 separate 8.5-inch by 11-inch details. Now, we have combined them into 11 22-inch by 34-inch sheets, with exception to the side street ditch reception detail, which remains on the 8.5 by 11 sheet layout. The details have been redrawn for clarity. Here's a plot of the pavement repair details for street cuts. This legacy detail from 2002 was difficult to read due to scanning and pixelization. That detail is now one of 3 details that can be combined onto a 22-inch by 34-inch sheet. Let's take a closer look at this redrawn detail. As you can see, this detail is much more legible and without any scanning pixelization. I'd like to point out that the drawing number is shown in the top left corner of this detail. This review cycle, we also reviewed the hot mix asphaltic concrete pavement detail to match the changes in Chapter 10 of the IDM. The HMAC pavement with ditch section has been updated to show a 1-foot subgrade offset from the back of curb. It now is consistent with the curb and gutter section above. As Ian discussed earlier in this presentation on Chapter 10, the roadway width can vary based on various design criteria. This detail has been updated to show the travelway width W as defined in Chapter 10, divided and undivided street dimensions tables. SW has also replaced the sidewalk width. Notes 1 and 2 have been added to send the engineer to the correct IDM chapter for the lane width and sidewalk width. Other changes to wording have been made to align with updates in the IDM and specifications. For more changes to this detail, refer to the clouded revised drawings provided on the Houston Permitting Center website. The standard detail for HMAC pavement for alleys has been removed. The old detail is shown on the left. Now, this detail has been removed because plan review has consistently received requests for commercial driveways connecting to private rights of alleys, access alleys. Any public use alley right-of-way should meet city roadway standards. This takes us to the concrete pavement details. It has been combined on a single 22-inch by 34-inch sheet with the pavement expansion and construction joint details. The new article titled Transverse Weakened Plane Joints was presented earlier in this presentation by Jamie. A requires a saw cut transverse contraction joint are to have a spacing not greater than 20 feet. This requirement has been included on the concrete pavement details to reiterate the concrete paving joint specification requirement. Since I didn't bring my magnifying glass, let's zoom into the area of the drawing to locate where that note has been added. Under Table 1, we have added a line on the 20-foot control joint spacing. Let's take a closer look at the wording and at Note 6, which is another addition. Table 1 note says, maximum transverse control joint spacing is equal to 20 feet and is in line with our new specification article. Note 6 has been added to make clear to the design community that the city wants to stick to the requirements set in the IDM. In the cases where the right-of-way is insufficient to accommodate the sidewalk width, the city wants to work together with the engineer through the variance process to ensure minimum standards are upheld. This brings us to another addition, curb ramp slope notes. 2 items have been updated in Chapter 17 of the IDM to remedy a frequently misunderstood requirement by the City of Houston. Far too many times has the design engineer, contractor, and City of Houston inspectors reached the construction phase of the project and run into permitting issues due to curb ramp slopes. Let's read these clarified requirements from Chapter 17. The Chapter 17 requirements that curb ramps conform to Texas Accessibility Standards, TAS, and American with Disabilities Act, ADA requirements are not new requirements. Also, the 1 to 15 max slope requirement has been on all standard details for quite some time as well. To clarify the city stance, the wording is expanded from curb ramps to include all ramps, sidewalks, and walkways. Also, it is to clarify that the strictest requirements shall govern when comparing the TAS, ADA, and City of Houston standards. Item number 8 has been added to the IDM to emphasize and clarify the maximum curb ramp slope that is acceptable to the City of Houston. A slope steeper than a 1 to 15 max slope will not be accepted by the City of Houston. Furthermore, both of these notes have been added to all standard pavement and sidewalk details to drive home that curb ramp steeper than 1 to 15 will not be accepted by the City of Houston. Here are a few new detail sheets with the notes highlighted. There are more sheets with notes, but this slide has limited space. I guess I might have to ask Brian for a variance on the size of this slide the next time we do this presentation. So that was a brief description of the important changes that were made to the IDM specification and the street paving and sidewalk details. As discussed at the outset of the street paving and sidewalk details section, the clouded revised set of details have been posted to the Houston Permitting Center's website for you to view. If there are any questions about the changes, please ask them in the chat at this time.
So, hey, Louise. So it appears a common question is, are the old drawings still available online, and are the new, as mentioned, as you just mentioned, are the new drawings there? You want to address the old drawing portion of that?
So I guess the answer to that question is yes and no. So the answer for the street paving and sidewalk details is no. All of those details have been updated to our new layout, the 22-inch by 34-inch layouts. And so those are the only details that are available on our website, and we're requesting and requiring the engineering professionals to use and for submittals. When it comes to standard details that are outside of this particular this chapter, the street paving and sidewalk details, there's still various details that are out there for water lines and sanitary sewer lines. Those details still remain on an 8.5 by 11-inch sheet, and so those we still do want those to be used, and those are still available on the website.
Also, one other question before we move on: are CAD files provided by the City of Houston?
At this moment, CAD files aren't provided by the City of Houston. There's been some talks, internally about this. We do understand that there are other municipalities and other government agencies that do provide those DWG files or CAD files. And so it's a working matter here at the city, but so far the direction that we've taken and that we'll continue to take unless there's an update is that we'll only provide PDF copies.
Good deal. So I think that's all the time we have for questions for this portion of this. But thank you for that presentation, Luis. I do, before rolling into our next section, I do want to touch on this because anybody who's done work for the city knows that the standard details or standard drawings in the back of a plan set are, on the we've had instances on the development side where some of these tried to put 12 of them on one sheet. We've had instances in capital projects where you can't even read these drawings. And so it begs the question, why as a designer are we including that? So the effort to redraw, the effort to put this as a normal plan sheet size so that they can be simply inserted into the plans and read clearly, so what the city's requirements are for the contractor for installation of whatever the topic is can be cleanly seen, and those are actually effective plans in a plan sheet. So I would encourage internal, external users to use the sheets appropriately so that the city standards, what the city wants from our operations groups, are communicated clearly to the fields and to the inspectors and to those who are using these, details. With that, we'll roll into the next portion of one of the last portions of our presentation today. So items under construction, we did want to touch on because there's been a lot of work done in one particular area, and then some things that are in our line of sight moving forward as we work, to get some financial things situated and our resources allocated appropriately and grow this group to address some of these sort of major issues that have sort of plagued different service lines for years. One item under development is precast manhole details. We have been working extensively. This has been a great collaborative effort over the last really year and a half. Since Chapter 9 cycle, we went through that. We identified some of the issues. We'll touch on that. But we've really been working on national, state, and local level to come up with new precast manhole details. On the horizon shortly after, the intent is precast inlets. And then we have spent a lot of time on Division 1 requests. We've got a number of Division 1 requests that are coming in, trying to find a path forward for these Division 1 items for the city. Really, Division 1 hasn't been updated in quite some time. These Division 1 is separate, is different than 2 through 16. These require proper vetting through not just the service lines, but our other users, whether it be general services or Houston Airport System, and working with legal to update those. So we put an extensive amount of time into some revisions, and we are working on finding a path forward for those in the upcoming year. Through Chapter 10, we've noticed, and the standards group has noticed, that the city's roadway standard drawings and specifications really, they need to align. Well, they don't currently align very well with either the county or the state or whomever. So one thing on the item, and something we've heard repetitively from HCA and from experiences, group experiences, whether that be through capital projects or talking to our roadway maintenance folks, this is something that, from cost and maintenance costs is a huge issue that we are looking to find a path forward to and try to tackle and get these more in line with our other agencies nearby. With that, to touch on kind of the precast manholes, because we hope to have this hopefully in timeline in the next several months to get this over the finish line. What you'll see in front of you are brick manholes, the old brick manholes standard drawings. We should not be installing brick manholes, and we have, although the city has specifications for cast in place and precast manholes, we still have the standard drawing that's out there. And so people are taking that to mean that the city prefers brick manholes, unfortunately. Last year through Chapter 9's review cycle, what you will see is that we redrew kind of the whole effort of this group recently to kind of redraw all our standard details for clarity, so at least we can see what we're looking at. We did that last year, but also added the note that, hey, we will be releasing optimistically in 2019 the new precast manholes to come out. So here we are in 2020. It was a very big effort working with the National Precast Concrete Association, Texas Concrete Pipe Association, reaching out to our friends at TxDOT in Bridge Division for input on how they created their manhole drawings, and then working hand in hand with our operations folks and talking to Braxton and Tanu and our operations folks to figure out what they wanted, what's important to them, what do you need, what issues are you having. And so to have these conversations has taken a lot of time and a lot of good time spent to develop these. What you see in front of you is the draft version of where we are now. We are currently working with, we've met externally with contractors and fabricators. We're currently reaching out with ACEC to kind of get comments, final comments through there, and working with our city engineer to address any final comments that we can address here and try to get these over the finish line that will, again, as with everything we do with this group, to minimize maintenance costs, to improve our infrastructure, and to capture those lessons learned. With that, I did want to touch on next year's review cycle. And I would stress, shortly we're going to post an e-blast or have an e-blast out there to talk about next year's review cycle, putting out for public comment. Everybody who has a comment referring to this, particularly these chapters that will come underneath review, this coming review cycle, submit a form to the Standards Review Committee website or email address, have some engineering backing behind it. One question that did come in about concrete strength that we did recognize on the questions in the chat was from our testing folks, internal testing folks, concerning a specification. I would strongly encourage anybody that sees inconsistencies throughout our specs, throughout anything else, to submit a form, ask for a form, post it, present your case for why that change needs to take place. And this group is tasked with figuring out how to get that done and making sure we can do that. These documents are large and voluminous, so the more eyes that see inconsistencies in these and the more lessons learned that people have and come forward with, the more we can address those. So back to the screen that's in front of you. We'll have open comment for the next several months. We'll post that. We'll let everybody know to the best of our ability that that is posted. We will be then seeking, again, going through the cycle again and seeking service line representatives from each service line and working through the process to update what Houston Water, what's major concerns that Houston Water might have at this time. So that's kind of what's under construction now, the thought now. With that, this is the time we have for questions on today's webinar. You can enter it to the chat now, and we can have, between the moderators here, just open discussion on questions received.
Okay, Brian, I'm going to ask a few questions that were brought up during the presentation that we didn't get a chance to answer. So someone asked, will a TIA be required for every project, even if the peak hour traffic is less than 100 vehicles per hour?
So the answer to that is no. So if you read through the chapter 15, it kind of depicts when a TIA is required. So 100 trips is the benchmark for tripping it, a TIA requirement, but also will trip it if the city has safety concerns. And the traffic engineer submitting the access management form should recognize this as well. If there are issues that require a tech memo or TIA, through the review of the access management form, one may be required, and those items should be pretty apparent. If you are implementing or asking to construct something that's out of the norm, that looks to be a safety concern, should you have I don't know, you can list a number of topics that might fall into this, a mid-block crosswalk or some sort of unsafe condition. The city is going to stop and say, well, you can have access, maybe, we'll review that, but we really want a traffic engineer to do a further investigation of this area or that area, whatever the topic may be. So generally speaking, 100 trips is the benchmark for TIA. Possible tech memo if it's minor, but if there's any safety concerns less than 100 trips, then we may require, the city as a whole may require a tech memo or TIA at that point.
Okay. Here's a question that I think a few people may be wondering. So if we have an upcoming submittal in the next week, do we need to apply these changes to the details?
So I would prefer, so this is kind of a common question throughout the day, is details or specs or changes to the IDM. I just kind of want to reiterate that there is a release letter signed by the city engineer and director in front of the IDM that talks about these requirements and when they go into effect. So, you know, for private development or, you know, initial review coming in after July 1, then yes, these requirements will go into effect. If the initial review is done prior to that, then no. So that applies to, I would just emphasize referring to that letter that explicitly talks about when these things go into effect.
Okay. Here's a question that was asked about design and control vehicles. So is there an allowance for turning speed changes on design control vehicles?
I'll take that one. I'm trying to understand exactly how that would come into play. We assume kind of default speeds as guidelines from AASHTO for these turns. We typically want to encourage slower speed turns. We're not trying to build highways in our neighborhoods, so we don't want to necessarily encourage higher turns, especially when they conflict with pedestrian crossings. So the speeds that are included here are intended to be slow speed turns. If there was a case where for some reason we determined that we needed a faster speed for whatever reason, that would be something that we would need to discuss early on in the design to determine if that can be accommodated with the radii, and if that's the appropriate decision for that location.
Okay. I think there's another question for you, Ian. So earlier you talked about required lane width for areas inside 610. Is the required lane width 10 feet exactly, or is that a minimum?
That is the standard. That is the maximum and the minimum. That varying from that will require, may require a variance. If you had the discussion early on enough, you can probably build it into your traffic engineering study, and that can go that route. Typically, the only time we'll vary from that is if we're doing an outside lane width that needs to accommodate a truck or a transit vehicle. So 10 foot is the standard.
Okay. I think I'm going to try to get in a couple more questions. Another one for you, Ian. So ramps are off on retrofit projects. Ramps are often engineered in the field, and 1 to 15 isn't always achievable. At what point in the process will that need to be cleared with the city? Or maybe Brian.
Brian, that might be better for Brian. Yeah.
Yeah, I just addressed the 1 to 15. I think needs to be seen as the minimum. Right, we've gotten questions about, hey, are there tolerances to 115? Hey, is this? Hey, is this? You know, early on when we got this from this request coming in from Johanna Clark early on, coming to the city engineer's office, Jamie and I dove way into this topic, and 1 to 12 is actually, if you try this in a wheelchair, is actually very difficult. The city stance on 1 to 15 is to provide a you know, a better experience and a safer experience for those who need those ramps. So, you know, when we ask that question, that's a weird question because, you know, kind of a shout out to our mayor's office for people with disabilities and to Angel out there. You know, this is a minimum. We're gonna uphold that. So if it's a retrofit and you run into real estate issues, you're going to see the city say, well, we're going to have to figure out those real estate issues, and kind of capitalize this on a question Angel sent in. You know, what if there are sidewalks built and there are things in the way? You know, the city as a whole, and Ian touched on this a little bit too with the mayor's initiative, we want to provide the pedestrian realm. We want to provide infrastructure that's accessible for all users. And so if there's an issue in the field, I think, you know, the Office of the Engineer does regulate the right-of-way and has an inspection staff that can investigate items like that. For 1 to 15, or is there tolerances to? There's really not tolerances. The city, kind of back to the variance question, when will variances be allowed? well, and, we're not, this is what the city wants all the way across the board. So the city is going to work very hard to enforce that. And anybody who's submitted a variance as of late, particularly over the last 2 years, particularly in the last 6 months, knows that the city is going to ask for complete engineering justification for why you are requesting a variance, why we want to make sure safety is ensured, and we are not granting variances just because. So I think questions like this go back to the designer and go, well, 115 is the minimum. This is what the city wants, from mayor's office to Houston Public Works to the planning department, all the way across the board. So if there are major issues, we need to design around them, and if it's not possible, then we need to have some serious conversations of how to handle it.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we're not trying to make these projects difficult. We're not trying to get in the way. And typically, I'm not seeing them come in with that issue where it's impossible to do the 115, and then we're making you change them at the last minute. What I'm seeing is that more and more they're being built without the knowledge of the 115 in the first place, and that's really what we're trying to get ahead of, to let people know that. And I'd say, of course, if you make every best effort to fit in 115, and just because something with utilities or infrastructure, buildings or something means you can only do a 1 to 12, I mean, we'll work with you on that. That's not typically where we're running into a problem, though. And I think the more that we can advertise that, that's why we kind of hit on that a couple of times, that a lot of it's just an education, just to let people know when you can do it, go just do the 1 to 15. And it shouldn't be a problem.
That's right. So with that, we'll stick to the agenda. A couple more slides here. Any additional questions as we kind of close out here? Send them to the Standards Review Committee at HoustonTX.gov. We will work hard to put them in a bucket to be addressed later, or try to address them as they come in. That is the goal for this group. To locate webinar and FAQs after this event, go to, again, the Design Construction Standards, select Infrastructure Design Manual. You'll see different areas there as shown on your screen where to get this information. And then